Times a Day podcast, episode 26 or 27. We're getting so numerous here. I'm losing track in all the excitement of the New Minds TV platform and the evolving lineup. So today we have a very, very important and special turn back into the world of education directly. We've taken some very exciting detours the last few interviews. Yesterday we focused on leadership in times of crisis. We had a great discussion last Friday on psychology and perception and divergent decision making. Fascinating stuff. We've had a yoga instructor and yoga master on teaching us some little hacks to do chair yoga throughout the day. And today we kind of bring it back full circle. When we launched this show over a month ago, it was all about helping parents, teachers, and families deal with the new reality of school. And so today we have brought fellow educator Andi McNair on the show, and she is very humble, but she is a brand upon to herself. She is a very widely popular and sought after source of wisdom on education. She taught in the classroom for 16 years before she left to kind of pursue a different platform. Her current job title is Digital Innovation Specialist. And we were joking before we went live here a little bit about this is kind of the moment she's been training for, in a way, when all the world needs to innovate in the digital world. Andi is also the author of, I just found out the third book is live, but I only have two here on the screen that you see. One is, I'm going to read the full titles here, even though they didn't fit on the screen. One is A Meaningful Mess, A Teacher's Guide to Student-Driven Classrooms, Authentic Learning, Student Empowerment, and Keeping It All Together Without Losing Your Mind. Yes, all of that, please. We need it. And the second one is Genius Hour, Passion Projects that Ignite Innovation and Student Inquiry. And we'll learn more about the third one in our conversation. But first of all, Andi McNair, welcome to the podcast. Thanks so much for joining us.
Yeah, thank you so much. I'm super excited to be here. I'm looking forward to sharing and learning with you. I think it's going to be lots of fun.
Yeah, so you and I actually co-presented a couple years ago at a TAGT conference. That's the Texas Association for Gifted and Talented. And that platform, that particular presentation was about educators like us who had sort of evolved their career in a way by finding a niche or a particular passion and just pursuing it beyond the classroom. And so we shared the stage with all the great minds, but I feel a great affinity to your journey as an educator in that you started in the classroom, like your roots are there just like mine, but we both saw kind of a path that took us outside of the classroom as a way to impact, beyond the traditional classroom experience. Can you, before we dive into the actual topic today of learning at home, can you tell us just a little bit about that journey for you? What was the prompt that kind of took you from classroom to this new platform and author?
Yeah, that's a great question and something that I love to share, because I think that as an educator in the classroom, I really kind of had that aha moment, as I think a lot of educators do. I was a really traditional teacher for a really long time. I was very set in my ways, and I checked all the boxes, good test scores, great relationships, all of those things, but kind of had that aha moment one day when I realized that what I was doing wasn't meaningful for my students. And I just decided it was time to turn the ship around, and I was going to, whatever it took, do what was meaningful for my students. And doing that meant that I had to be very self-aware. I had to listen to the feedback from my learners. And so really became involved in Genius Hour, passion-based learning, giving my students that opportunity to learn based on their passions. I was able to connect with an amazing educator, Don Wettrick. And in doing so, just really began to teach. I learned from Dave Burgess about designing experiences, and I began to move away from just writing lesson plans and move toward designing real experiences for my students, and did that through their passions and their interests while still covering the standards. I spent my last few years in the classroom as a GT educator, and so I really just had that aha moment. And I'm telling you, Ben, it was in doing that, it just created in me this need to help share with other educators that it is okay to see that need to do something different and to take those risks and be willing to do what's best for our learners. And so that's kind of where all this started, just kind of set out on that path of wanting to share all of the things that I learned in my classroom with other teachers and create those relationships. And it's been quite the journey, and I'm definitely thankful for it, for sure.
Yeah, knowing what I know about you now, it is truly hard to imagine you as that traditional teacher that you described. Kind of all about.
I think a lot of people think that.
Yeah, but what a testament to your growth mindset, to your open-mindedness, to your open-heartedness, to kind of be vulnerable like that and say, you know what, I have a lot to learn. There's a lot wrong with what I'm doing, and this is not meaningful. And to make that leap, to find mentors like you mentioned, and to kind of take that leap and be a beginner again in a way, that's huge.
Mm-hmm.
Huge kudos to you for making that journey. And now, like you said, being a role model, I know you're a go-to resource for so many teachers and educators and parents as well. So awesome. And then could talk about really quickly the journey from that to author. I think Genius Hour was actually your first book. Is that right?
It was. So I can remember being at TAGT, that conference for GT educators in the state of Texas, and one of my favorite conferences for sure. And I remember sharing the 6 P's of Genius Hour, which was just kind of our roadmap, a process that we used. And a lot of people were asking questions about it. And I remember being at lunch with someone and they said, have you thought about writing a book about this? And I was like, oh my gosh. I mean, I'm just a teacher in a classroom. I'm pretty sure I'm not looking to author a book. I don't know the first thing about that. And really just had to take a risk, right? And I remember contacting Proofrock and being like, what if we did a book on Genius Hour and really kind of this roadmap and what it could look like? And they were all in, and I'm so blessed to be able to work with them, and was able to write that book on really a process for Genius Hour, what it can look like when we have that roadmap. And then A Meaningful Mess just came as a result of me wanting to just be vulnerable and tell people, hey, this is my story, because that's exactly what it is a meaningful mess. I feel like that's exactly what we're in right now, right? This is a mess. We have to make it meaningful. But I think for me, The Meaningful Mess is really the book about my journey and some real practical ways that I was able to help my students make connections. So yeah, I think, and then just continuing that, if you would have told me a few years ago that I would have authored 3 books, I would have told you have lost your mind. It's never happening. So It's very cool. Again, I'm very thankful and blessed for sure, but just love being able to share with educators, not just the why things have to change, but also the how we can do that. I think that's so important right now.
Yeah. I think sometimes looking backwards in retrospect, we can see the little small steps and turns and curveballs that kind of led us to where we are today. But like you said, when you put yourself back in those shoes of the past you, sometimes it's really hard to envision how that path could have even come together. But it's beautiful. Okay, so yes,
absolutely.
Speaking of meaningfulness, you made a nice little leap into our current situation. So we've had lots of discussions on New Minds TV and even off channel and meetings and things like that with parents and other teachers about some of the challenges right now. So I don't want to necessarily rehash all that. You've been having the same conversations. You're consulting with schools and teachers and districts. But let's kind of get right down to it. So here we are suddenly in a brand new learning context where parents have charge of, facilitating, coaching, guiding. We can look for some other synonyms too. Their child's learning experience with the help of their teachers, who have had to make an amazing and incredible pivot themselves with the schools and the school districts. And I think based on discussions that we've had in the beginning, a lot of parents tried to make home be school, and they had really high aspirations. They had really structured and disciplined schedules and protocols and systems and checklists and things like that. And depending on the household, those might have lasted half a day or a week. But I think it's safe to say that a month in, it's a meaningful mess. Hopefully meaningful. It's definitely a mess, right? So on your end, you've been working with a lot of teachers directly. What are you seeing that needs to be addressed? The other day you posted a wonderful thing on LinkedIn that really got my attention, and it was a graphic organizer about making learning meaningful. And that seems to be a thread for you, actually, the meaning making. So what is it you're seeing now that you feel like that's the key word?
Yeah, absolutely. I feel like that's one of the things that I find myself saying at the beginning of every conversation, whether it be with teachers or it's a webinar or a podcast. It still has to be meaningful, right? This is a mess. And I've also said, this, we can see this as an obstacle or an opportunity. It is an obstacle. None of us would want to be here if we didn't have to be, but it is a mess, and we have to find meaning in this mess. And I think doing that means that we have to be innovative, and we have to recognize that this is not school, right? School is a place that we go to learn. But that does not mean that we can't see this as an opportunity for our students to make real connections between that place that they go to learn that we call school and now their home experience that they're having. And so for me, as I've really kind of wrestled with this, I think I've boiled it down to two really practical things that we have to keep in mind. One, we have to simplify learning right now.
Okay.
It can't be about checklists. It can't be about the things they have to do or have to complete. We have to simplify that, and we have to prioritize authentic connections. So those connections that we can make, those things that we can tie in, are really important right now, because it's through those connections that I think real learning is going to happen.
I love that. So the two steps, the simplification steps were, well, simplify and make authentic connections, right? Can you take us through a concrete example of that?
Yeah, so I think for me, if we just go into the designing a meaningful learning experience, that was really the next piece there. Sorry, they're in the kitchen with my family. So as we kind of go through this and we think about what designing a meaningful learning experience looks like, I had to break it down into three pieces. And I have, for a while, talked about something called the 3 E's to design an experience: engaging your students as soon as they come into the classroom, designing an experience that they're willing to invest in, and then empowering them to take that beyond the walls of the classroom. So when I was thinking through simplifying learning, I really just kept coming back to that. What does that look like in remote learning? How do we do that? And it took me a couple of weeks, if I'm honest, to really wrap my mind around it.
Yeah.
But as I kind of broke it down, I thought about, the first thing we have to do is we have to get them to that willingness to invest. I think that's one thing we're seeing right now, and we're hearing from parents is, what do you do when my kid just isn't willing to do the work, or it's causing more stress in the home than is necessary right now? Because I think the last thing we as educators want or need to do right now is to bring more stress into an already stressful, uncertain situation. So that engage piece is getting them to that willingness to invest, and then designing that experience, that opportunity to learn. And I think as educators, to take some pressure off of ourselves, that's how we have to see it. We can design and we can give the opportunity. We can get them to that willingness to invest, and then it is an opportunity to learn. We don't have a whole lot of control right now as far as this is what you have to do. That has been taken off of the table. And then finally, I think the most important piece is that empower piece, making that connection between whatever it is they've learned at school or whatever it is they've learned through that experience, and helping them make a connection to their right now, whether it's a connection to something they're doing in the kitchen, a walk they go on outside, whatever that is, those real connections, that's where the parents can come in and play a big role through that facilitation that you mentioned.
Yeah, so it's not a moment to go more abstract, what you're saying. It's a moment to make it more grounded in present experience. And the 3 E's are fantastic. I'm just going to review the 3 E's for the listeners: engaging them, designing an experience, and then the empowerment piece. Okay, so I think I love that because it's an easy way for parents too to conceptualize this. Like, they're the ones facilitating the learning experience, maybe indirectly, maybe in some cases directly. So, all right, now I want to dig in a little bit and kind of walk through the 3 E's with a specific example. If you have one, do you have one that you want to, like a subject matter that you want to pull an example from?
Yeah, so I think that I actually just designed an experience for my daughter, because I thought, you know what, if I'm going to preach this and I'm going to put it out there, I'm going to actually try it. So that's what you get when you are the kid of someone who loves to do things like this. You get to be the kid.
Yeah, built-in kid.
So I actually went through and I looked at the standards. In Texas, we have the TEKS. And so I actually looked at her standards and what she had left to learn about in class. And I was just able to make some connections. So I was really just looking for those big ideas. I wasn't digging down deep into the standards. I was looking for those big connections, those big ideas. And one of the things that stood out to me that she had coming up was that they were going to be learning about catastrophic events in science, and they were going to be learning about the hurricane of 1900 in social studies. Well, ding, 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 right? That's a perfect connection.
Right.
So I just started with the hurricane of 1900 as the engage piece. And actually on the website that I'll share with you before we get off of this so that you can link it for the people that are watching, I actually took a screenshot of each one of these so you can see how I designed it for her. I set it all up in Flipgrid. And in Engage, the piece was the hurricane of 1900 because we live in Texas and that is where that hurricane occurred. And so she watched that video. It was 7 minutes long. She watched the entire thing.
Okay.
And her charge there was to just think about, what do you already know about hurricanes? What did you learn about the hurricane of 1900? And then I kind of took an opportunity to weave some social emotional in. We talked about some of the emotions those people must have felt during that time.
Yeah.
So that was really the engage piece, if that makes sense. Does that help?
Absolutely. I taught fourth grade for many years, and I know wild weather and natural disasters are a magnet for kids. How old is your daughter, by the way?
Absolutely. She's 7th grade, so she's a hard age for sure.
Okay.
A hard age to engage.
Yeah. So yeah, that makes total sense. I love how you use the hurricane. That's a high interest topic. It's engaging. Mm-hmm. Okay, so there's E number 1. That was your engage in your invitation.
Right. Just getting her to that willingness to invest. What is going to really kind of spark like, oh, now I want to kind of know more about this. And so the next piece was the experience piece. What is she going to do to learn about hurricanes? So I have to know, what is kind of the big thing I'm trying to get her to understand. And in this case, it was what is a hurricane and what are some of the effects that hurricanes have on the world around us. And so that experience piece was just that. What is a hurricane? Brain Pop right now is free. And so it doesn't always have to be a video. I know that my daughter tends to enjoy videos as long as they're short. So in this part, I actually not only did a really short, because she'd already watched one video, a really short Brain Pop video about what is a hurricane, but then I included 3 wonders from Wonderopolis. And if you haven't seen Wonderopolis, you can thank me later. It is amazing. So on Wonderopolis, they have these different, it revolves around kids' curiosities. So there are different wonders that kids have asked about. So she had 3 choices that she could explore. So she didn't have to do all of them, but she could decide whether she learned more about hurricane names, the eye of a hurricane, or just wanted to learn more about what is a hurricane. Yeah. So that is her reading and her vocabulary, because in Wonderopolis, there's a vocabulary challenge and a did you get it? So now we've done social studies, science, and we've got some comprehension and vocabulary in. Make sense? You with me?
100% with you, yeah. Yeah.
Okay, and so then the last piece, that empower piece, that's the piece that I feel like is about connecting all of what she's learned to her right now. So how do I make this meaningful for her? So for this particular experience, I had her go to one of our local news stations, whether it be, she had 3 choices, and I linked to those websites, and I asked her to figure out the wind speed for today. So tell me what the wind speed is today. And then she went to a website to look at a Category 5 hurricane. And what would the highest wind speed be of a Category 5 hurricane? And then she had to decide how many more times would the wind have to increase today to be the highest level of a Category 5 hurricane. And so there's our math, right? Yeah. And so she was able to connect how it feels outside right now today in her world to those hurricanes that she had been learning about. And then finally, there's an enrichment piece, just because I know that I've talked to so many teachers who have said, I'm designing what they need, and then they're asking for something different. And so that's when I made it a priority to weave in a life ready skill, which creativity I think is important. And so her enrichment piece was just to go on to Canva and to create an infographic with several different facts about hurricanes. So if she finished her 3 pieces and she wanted something more, she could do that, but she certainly didn't have to. So that's kind of how it was laid out. I know that was kind of long, but that's how I laid it out. And we were able to get in science, social studies, math, reading language arts, and life ready skills and social emotional skills. And it took me maybe an hour to design that at the most.
Yeah, that was my next question. It's like the amount of prep is not overwhelming. And you didn't frame it this way, but that was basically an all-out STEAM project. You know, not just one step away from an all-out project-based learning, open-ended STEAM project. And you
Right.
didn't frame it that way, but doing the Canva infographic would also be arts and design for STEAM.
Mm-hmm.
And you have the language arts in there, and it would just be a small
Yeah,
loop
that's true.
to get some extra tech in there. You know, like how do they measure wind speed? You know, back then compared to now, things like that. So that is fantastic. So if you're a teacher listening, you've just given them a framework to create some really valid experiences for the kids that they're responsible for. But even if you're a parent trying to make these meaningful connections, that's definitely within reach. Like everything you described, you know, being a professional educator helps for sure, but nothing you described is kind of like out of the range of a parent who wants to be involved in designing an experience for their kid. I love it. So a couple other questions came up as you were describing that. So you talked about how you intentionally linked that to some of the standards, right? And you intentionally weaved in exposure and practice in different areas. But what I'm hearing a lot these days from parents about being worried about their kids falling behind during this period. Like there's going to be gaps because it's not even. Like, how do I know my kid's not falling behind, you know, his or her peers right in this period? What advice or insight do you have for that concern?
I think if we look at the big picture, I think anytime we think about our kids missing school, we have just been trained to think that means they're going to get behind or this is not going to be a good situation. But the reality is, in the big scheme of things, if we look at the complete, you know, their complete school experience from kindergarten all the way through 12th grade, these 2 or 3 months that they're missing is not going to be that detrimental. I think possibly. But could we see this? I think this goes back to that whole obstacle or opportunity. When you think about it being detrimental, we're seeing it as an obstacle, right? Oh my gosh, they're not in school. Instead, if we can see this as an opportunity to see that there were so many things in school that we can't do because of the expectations, because of accountability, that right now we've kind of hit the pause button. And so hitting that pause button has given us an opportunity for our students to take all of the things that they've learned this year, all of the things that they've heard their teachers say, the things that they've done in class, and now make real connections to those things. Never before have we had that opportunity for them to make those connections and understand why they're learning it and how they use it. And as I hear about more families taking walks and more families eating at the table and cooking in the kitchen together, oh my gosh, board games, those are the perfect opportunities to make those connections that we've needed to make all along. It's just now we have the time to do so.
Yeah, I love that. So one of my personal soapbox topics is helping kids find their passion, their element. And the argument I've been making in this show over the last month, one of them is that this is an unprecedented opportunity, like you said, for parents to get kind of like to a level of deep knowing about their kids and what those like unrecognized passions and curiosities and talents might be, and an opportunity to begin to nurture those in a really kind of effective way. So I agree with you 100% that if we just flip the framework a little bit and see it as an opportunity to have that, you know, deep time, deep learning, deep connections, to consolidate and synthesize, because sometimes we go at such a high pace that it doesn't kind of sink below the surface. It's all about, you know, the accountability and the tests and things like that, and it never kind of gets into that deep level of connection. So now's the time for it to sort of sink in, and which kind of is a perfect leap to my next question and comment, which is the Genius Hour piece. Now, I know Genius Hour was originally inspired by the corporate world, by places like Google, and then it made its way into education for the school setting. But we actually had a comment from Doug. He's a New Minds team member. He watches the show at the end of the day, and he says Genius Hour at home seems like the perfect, you know, platform. So what do you think about taking the concept of Genius Hour, which I know you've always thought of as a school time thing? How can that work at home? And first of all, maybe you should start, for those who don't know, just with a 30-second description of what Genius Hour is.
Oh, I can absolutely do that. I am so passionate about Genius Hour. I think partly because it turned my educational career around, and it is the reason that I stayed in education, honestly, and just the impact that it had on my learners. I always tell people, whether I'm speaking or talking to educators, when I talk Genius Hour, I'm not talking from the perspective of somebody who just thinks it's research based and it's a great idea. I'm telling you from a teacher who did it with her students how amazing it is and those connections that can be made. So basically, it's giving your students or giving your kid at home an opportunity to pursue their passions and learn through that. So a lot of application. And one of the things that I always like to share is that Genius Hour, when done well, is that opportunity to take learning to the next level and to really go deep into that understanding. So as far as Genius Hour at home goes, it's funny you said that. One of the first things I did when this kind of happened was created a Genius Hour at home resource where I just it was created for kids, and it just walks kids through the 6 P's. So start with your passion, plan your project out, pitch your idea to your stuffed animals or to your parents or whoever will listen, work on a project to develop a product, and then give a presentation. And so that's a great resource. It's just bit.ly/Genius Hour at home. And so I think doing that at home makes so much sense, because what better way to teach your kid, or like you were saying, your soapbox is to get to know your kid really well right now and make those really deep connections. What better way to do that than to help them work on a project that creates change or make an impact on the world around them? I think that right now kids feel very out of control, right? We have a senior at home. He has no control over the fact that he may not have a graduation, no control over the fact that his baseball season has been taken away. But there are some things they can control. There are some changes they can make in the world around us from their home. There are impacts they can make through social media. And so I think Genius Hour at home makes a lot of sense right now. So I'm so glad you said that and gave me the opportunity to share, because, gosh, what better way for them to make those connections like you were talking about?
Yeah, absolutely. So I want to repeat that link, because I think parents are going to be jumping all over that. It was bit.ly.
Yeah, it's bit.ly. It's bit.ly/Genius Hour at home.
/Genius Hour at home. Okay. And can
Yes.
they find that from Andi McNair at McNair.com as well?
Yeah, they actually can. I'll put that on the front page tonight, so it'll be there when they go to andymcnair.com. I actually need to add all of the at-home learning resources, so I'll make sure it's on the front page as soon as we get off tonight.
Beautiful. That's great. Okay, so andymcnair.com is the home of all things Andi McNair, and you're going to update it with the resources for home. And so we've touched base with the 2 books that I knew about, A Meaningful Mess and Genius Hour. Are you willing and able to talk about book number 3 to kind of give us a taste?
Absolutely. The third book was very different from anything else that I've done. It's a resource book for Genius Hour. So it's basically taking Genius Hour to the next level and not just doing projects, but doing projects that create change and make an impact, really centered around giving teachers or parents practical ways to make this happen. Because I think for so many, Genius Hour makes sense, but teachers are busier now than ever before. Parents are busy. And so this book was really just a practical way to say, hey, here are some things that you can use. Here are some ideas that you can implement immediately. So we were kind of drilling down into the Genius Hour process.
Yeah, fantastic. Okay, so I want to thank you for kind of giving us your time and your insight and your wisdom today. It was a great conversation. I really enjoyed it. I think parents and teachers could get a lot out of it as well. So many resources. I'll just repeat, andymcnair.com is where you can find links and references, and not to mention your blog, which is full of great stuff as well.
I do blog a lot.
Yeah. And I know you're very active on social media as well. What's your favorite platform for people to find you on?
Probably Twitter. So my Twitter handle is @McNairAN3. @McNairAN3.
Okay, awesome. And also from andymcnair.com, they can find a link to your socials as well.
Absolutely.
Okay, and just while you're still here, I wanted to tell you and the world about, just remind them that actually New Minds, starting tonight and for a 24-hour event, it's the Global Cardboard Challenge, brought to you by New Minds TV. So what we're doing, Andi, is beginning at 7 p.m. tonight, which is Earth Day Asia. So we have a team in Vietnam actually kicking it off with
Oh my word.
Justin. And so for the next 24 hours, beginning at 7 p.m., we're going to be having live streams on the hour that kind of coach, encourage, and guide kids on some kind of creativity project that has to do with using recyclables. And then in between time, like every 15 minutes or so, we'll have another video or insight, something drop related to creativity or related to the cardboard challenge itself. And there's different things kids can do projects and upload them up to our site where we'll share them out. So that's one way that we're trying to add meaning to the mess, is give kids
I love
the
it.
opportunity to adapt, use that flexible thinking. Fluency,
Yep.
flexibility, originality, elaboration is kind of our foundation for
Awesome.
the cardboard challenge. So just wanted to, while we were still live, I wanted to share that and also let you know if you have families looking for a special challenge. And the good thing is, for those who can tune in live, fantastic, but all those videos live on in the internets as well, on YouTube, on newminds.tv. So all right, well,
I will definitely share that out. That's very cool. That's awesome.
And so this live stream, of course, we had several friends join live, but this will live on Facebook, on YouTube, and I'll send you the link to this on YouTube if you'd like to share it, and on newminds.tv. And I think it's going to be a fantastic resource for parents and teachers looking to add a layer of meaning. So thanks again, Andi, for joining, and we'll keep in touch, and we'll watch your space for more great stuff.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for allowing me to share. I appreciate it. It's been fun.
Okay, stay safe.
All right, you too.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye, y'all.